Welcome to this special story about Kościół Święty Andrzeja, the Church of St. Andrew in Kraków. I can assure you, this was not a normal church. The church was built between 1079 and 1098, so at the end of the 11th century. That means the church is almost 1,000 years old already. It was built in the Romanesque style. It is one of the few buildings in this style that is still standing, so it's very special. Especially because Kraków has a really rich history of wars and attacks. And this church was the only building, together with the Wawel Castle, that survived all those attacks. It even survived some fires, because they were very common in the history. So since it was such a strong building, besides the religious purposes, it also had a defensive purpose. Yes, the church literally saved the lives of many people. In 1241, for example, there was the famous attack of the Mongols on Poland, and they reached Kraków and they destroyed everything and everyone. It became a shelter for some of the residents that were quick enough. The people inside could defend themselves because in the building, in the church, there were like the small windows through which they could attack the Mongols. You can still see these windows when you're close to the church, and that reminds you that it's not a usual church. So imagine that you're inside the church with the big walls, and you hear that outside of these big walls, everything and everyone is destroyed. And you know that you are safe because you're in this church. And while you are seeing the fighting, you have that faith and that calmness in you because you know you will be safe because you're not alone. A lot of emotions go through your body because you feel everything all at once. Sadness because people you love are being murdered. The city you love is being destroyed, and you're also mad because of that. But at the same time, you feel that calmness and that hope that you will survive and the people who are with you as well, and that you will rebuild the city again, and you will never ever give up. So after the attacks, there were always survivors. You can imagine that it was like a really special church for the people of Kraków. And of course, then it was also called the Lower Castle, because the nearby Upper Castle was of course the one on Wawel Hill that was also used to defend the city. But you now know that you can also call this church the Lower Castle. But how was it that were so many people who were quick enough to find the shelter in the church? Well, that's a special story that I will tell in another video with another drawing that has to do with the Saint Maria Church. You now know that it's for religious purposes and defensive purposes. But in the 14th century, in 1320, the church was entrusted to the Order of the Poor Clares, also known as the Nuns of the Order of Saint Clare. nuns lived the lives of contemplation, and they were restrained from the contacting of the outside world. So they stayed in the church. They had a building in the back of the church. When you visit the church, you also see something that is relatively new, and those are the Baroque domes on top of the two towers, because they were added in 1639. You will also be surprised when you open the door and get inside the church, because it has a Baroque interior that's dated from the 1700s, so that is very different from the Romanesque outside of the church. Since you now know the story behind this special treasure of the past in Krakow, I know you have to visit it and see it with your own eyes and feel what happened in the past and feel the richness of the history that is there. So even though you're standing there in the moment of the 21st century with maybe some other people who are walking by happily talking, not paying too much of attention to the church, imagine that you are almost 1,000 years back in time and the first stone was placed, and then 200 years later that there was sort of an alarming going on, and you knew that you had to reach the church and get inside so you could be safe and defend the city with some other residents. And then when you stepped outside again, the whole city was destroyed and you knew you had to start all over again. But at the same time you knew it was possible because you did it before. Because you're in Poland and Poland always raises up. No matter what happens, we always fight back and we will never give up. That's what this church stands for, and I hope you feel it when you visit it and that you take a moment to appreciate not just the building, the church, the faith, God, but the whole story and the whole treasure. Please subscribe if you want to know more of this beautiful city, because I'm telling all the stories, and not only of Krakow, not only of Poland, but of all the places in the world I will visit.